Hey everybody, this is Vince Miller. So good to be back with you. As you can see, I'm back in my home digs where, by the way, it's freezing cold here. It was much warmer in Florida. And that brings up another great point. I would love to have you join me in Florida for that retreat. We have retreats all over the country this year. I would love to have you join me. There is one in Florida at the end of this month. So check that out in the links that go with this video. If you want to come, I'd love to have you there. Maybe you want to bring somebody else with you, some friends, some guys from church. Man, check it out. Check it out. Just consider it. It might be a good time for you to reset spiritually. But for today, we're going to be in John chapter 3. I'm going to read verses 13 through 15. Here's what the text says. It says, "No one has ascended into heaven except he who descended from heaven." In other words, you can't go back and forth unless you're the guy that can go back and forth. The Son of Man is that guy. As Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness. So what is this reference here? So this is an Old Testament reference to Moses when he was in the desert, in the wilderness. There were some people getting bit by snakes, and for them to get healed, they would look at a bronze serpent, and therefore Moses would lift up the serpent, they would look at it, and they would be healed, okay? So it provided salvation. So it says, "And as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man," that's Jesus, "be lifted up, that whoever believes in him may have eternal life." Now, this is a super interesting text here, right? Because in the Gospel of John, there are going to be 3 times that John references the terminology lifted up, lifted up, lifted up. Okay, so 3 times it's going to happen in the Gospel of John. First, we see it right here, and then again in John chapter 8, verse 28, which states, "So Jesus said to them," this is his enemies, "when you have lifted up, you, the enemies, have lifted up the Son of Man, then you will know that I am he, and that I do nothing of my own authority, but speak just as the Father taught me." And then it appears one more time in John chapter 12, verse 32, which reads, and Jesus states this himself, "And I, when I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all people to myself." Now, if you read these 3 in sequence, you actually see what John is doing here. It's this long narrative that's playing out. So here's what he's saying. He's saying, number 1, there's an ambassador in the Old Testament that did the lifting in the wilderness, the lifting up, and that was Moses, and he did it with the intent to save. Number 2, you are going to try to do the lifting. You're going to do the lifting with the intent to kill. You're going to lift me up with the intent to kill me and put me to death. But number 3, I, Jesus, and finally, I'm going to do the lifting. And Jesus is going to do the lifting with the intent to save all people. But remember, right here, the greater context of the gospel, John is trying to prove that Jesus came down as a deity from heaven and went back up to heaven. And Jesus has to be able to do both, right? He has to be able to come down, and he's got to be able to be lifted back up. Otherwise, he's not a deity. And some want to prove that Jesus is not a deity. So their plan is to do this, is to kill him, to prove that Jesus and his disciples were wrong. But in the end, they end up proving that they were wrong and Jesus was right, which is kind of laughable, isn't it? So just kind of remember today that if Jesus really is God, there is no plan that you can ever make that will outplan or outwit him. I love you guys. I pray this has blessed you. If it has, be humbled today by Jesus' ingenuity, his intelligence, and his plan, and live in it. I love you. See you right back here again tomorrow.